Hello and welcome to Old Tunes Fresh Takes. This is the podcast where we learn old tunes, record fresh takes of them and challenge you to do the same.
We're really excited to be back for the new year with more baffling, bloody and beautiful tunes for you to get your teeth into. And this time we've got guests.
That's right, so for this episode we're joined by the incredible Anna Roberts-Gavolt, who will be introducing the first tune of the series, the wife of Usher's Well, also known as The Three Babes. She'll be telling us a bit about how she got into folk music and why she's picked this tune for us to work on.
This series is running a little differently to the last one. In 4 weeks' time, Anna will be back with us for part 2 of this episode, where we listen along to your fresh takes. So, if you want us to feature your take on the wife of Usher's Well, you'll need to send it in by Monday 5th of April.
This means we'll have more space to go deep into the song and its history, and we'll have more time to showcase the incredible arrangements that you've been working on. As always, this is for musicians of all styles and abilities, so whether you've got a PhD in plain chant or a higher certificate in air drumming, we want to hear it.
In the meantime, if you want to follow along as we chat through the wife of Usher's Well, you'll find links to scores, chords and lyrics in the description of this episode, as well as playlists of our favourite versions to help you get started. So this month we spoke to Anna Roberts-Gavolt about the wife of Usher's Well, otherwise known as The Three Babes. Anna is an artist, composer and musician moving outward from her background in traditional music. Listeners might know her as one half of duo Anna and Elizabeth, whose 2018 album The Invisible Comes to Us was described by The New Yorker as a radical expansion of what folk songs are supposed to do. We were really excited to talk to Anna both as a singer and as a producer, someone who explores traditional storytelling with a mix of experimental sound design and interdisciplinary performance techniques. Before we hear what she had to say, let's have a listen to Anna and Elizabeth's track Mother in the Graveyard, taken from their album The Invisible Comes to Us.
Mother in the graveyard and I'm on the land. Look for me. Mother in the graveyard and I'm on the land. And I want God's bosom to be my pillow. Hide me over in the rocks of ages. Look for me. I am climbing Jacob's ladder. Look for me. I am climbing Jacob's ladder. And I want God's bosom to be my pillow. Hide me over in the rocks of ages. Look for me.
So Anna, it's wonderful to have you on the show. It's such an honour.
It's so nice to be here. I'm so excited about this podcast and the idea for it. It's so awesome.
We're really pleased to hear that, as we're quite excited too.
So what is your background in folk music? You say you're moving outward from the Appalachian tradition, is that?
Yeah, well, I'm from New England. I'm a Yankee, which is, I guess, important to people in Appalachia. You know, I'm not from there, but I moved to Kentucky maybe over a decade ago when I was in college and was super welcomed by a group of musicians down there, fiddlers, banjo players, singers. Was super obsessed, super immersed, stayed down there, moved to Virginia. That's where I met Elizabeth. So I feel like my immersion in a kind of folk scene was through this very multi-generational scene, a scene that is very diverse, not racially for the most part, but diverse in the sense of how people came to the music. So still a lot of people who come to the music through their family or through their neighbor. And then a bunch of people like me who, you know, just fell in love with it and moved down there. You know, maybe there were singers in my distant family past, but kind of learning a lot from people for whom the singing was more a regional or family tradition. The last record I made with Elizabeth was taken a lot of ballads from New England and Vermont. Kind of this idea of, wait, there must be ballads from the place that I grew up to. There's a field recorder named Helen Hartness Flanders who made 4,000 wax cylinder recordings. And so I did about a month and a half of listening to those songs. So a lot of the songs on the recent record were from that archive and from singers that she met. You know, a lot of the same songs and some different ones, but a lot of songs that came from England and Ireland. And
it's interesting. It's because I think place was one of the things that me and Jack got interested in. This idea that, and in the world that we're in, especially where everything is so globally, you know, you can listen to music from wherever. When people are making music now, they're not necessarily thinking, I want to continue a tradition. I certainly found myself feeling drawn to like, well, what is music making been like in the place where I've grown up, the place that's kind of formed me. You have to discover it.
yes.
I think,
you know, speaking as the American in this conversation, I think for me, a big part of the last couple years is the desire to really rethink how I think of regional American music, because frankly, like all of the music that I sing that I might have said, you know, this is Appalachian music or this is New England music. It's all like the music of colonizers.
Right.
So it's all music of these immigrant people who came, and there's so many layers to that in America. But I feel like this is the music. This ballad was sung in Vermont 100 years ago, but like what was sung in Vermont or this place, you know, 500 years ago.
Right.
And it's certainly not any of this music. And so I feel like there's a lot of reckoning to be done for Americans about how we connect to it, because I do think it's important for white Americans to be connected to our ancestors. That's part of like what whiteness has stripped, like by becoming white. There is this part that you do give up to enter into that place of power. But I think it's like has to be balanced with this new way of talking about it, saying like, this is the music that reminds me that I'm not from this land, that helps me think about what would it have been like to be my ancestor and like missing the old place, like all these ballad singers in Appalachia who sang about castles in old Scotland. Right. And what was it like to miss Scotland and how did that prevent them from being aware of like, what are the stories of this land and what are the stories of the people who live here and have lived here and know about this mountain or know about this rock or this type of plant. Like,
so it's sort of initially, or you might want to learn these things to sort of, you know, pick up on the music of a place, but then you've gone on that journey to sort of nuance that by saying, well, it's not really the music of this place, but it's the music of my people who were in this place at this time for this reason. That's really interesting.
Oh, if I were Queen of France, or still better, Pope of Rome, I'd have no fighting men abroad, nor weeping maids at home. All the world should be at peace, and the right should be the might. I'd have those that made the quarreling the only ones to fight.
I've heard a lot of people say that the music of the Appalachian Mountains was a sort of purer continuation of British folk music, because as Britain was industrializing, then the Appalachians were still relatively remote and were able to continue these traditions. Is that your understanding of it?
It's a super good question. I think it comes from a few places. I've always been interested in that sense of like missing or nostalgia as being part of why you hold on to something. So that it does ring true, right? To imagine these people who have left a place and they're in a very new place, and it's a difficult place for them. Perhaps they're building houses, they're learning whole new ecologies, and they're more isolated. So I can imagine the songs being this, like a location in the mind that is really connecting them to the place that they came from. So I feel like it's not exactly the purity. It's more just the things that drive you to hold on to something are maybe different for an immigrant, just thinking of an immigrant or refugee in general. The word pure is interesting because a lot of the folklorists, a lot of the ballad collecting in America especially was really driven by racism, including like the people who funded the first year of Helen Hartness Flanders research also funded eugenics experiments.
Right.
It was connected to this desire to say, oh, our white race, we have these kind of noble history. Like we're connected to Shakespeare and like all the noble things that being English of English origin represents, or Anglo. It was this part of this very like Anglophile era or energy that was happening. And so that's part of what, whether overtly or present but not acknowledged, that energy was a huge part of folk music at that time. And the real separation of songs, like only being interested in the old British songs, not collecting songs that might have come from Black and African-American sources, like not just kind of painting the image of this Appalachian person as this white Appalachian person as like, oh, they're poor, but like, oh, they come from this pure race.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think it's so important to kind of bring these conversations into thinking about folk music. I mean, I remember the first time that I started to really question, like, what is my nostalgia about? Did I want to go back in time? Like, did I want to live in that time? Was there part of me, like I watched Songcatcher and like, was like, oh, that, you know, that beautiful time, like when life was simpler and the erasure of, well, fuck, it just was not simple for people of color. I mean, it's still not simple, but particularly then. That was kind of triggered when Trump started saying, like, make America great again. And I was like, I don't think that. And then I just was like, well, I've dedicated so much of my life to asking old white people about how great their lives were in the past. Right. And I think that's still a good gesture. I think there's important things to learn from these elders, for sure.
I don't really know anyone who's connected with English folk music, so even English folk music feels foreign and like it's not my culture. And starting out doing this podcast, we had serious concerns that like we're not of this culture, like even if we're English, or you know, what right do we have to come in and do this? And
but
generally
that's cool. To me, that's so rad, because I think even as we're talking about all these complications, right, there can be this like gatekeeping snobbery that sometimes feels unnecessary. And it, like, to us, it's like, oh, this stuff we studied, like I can recite all these facts about this ballad we're going to talk about. But it's like, for some of these people, they just heard a song. They're like, oh, I heard this song. It's like, it's wicked. And then they sing it. I think it's just part of this important tension. Like in any folk scene I've ever come across, there's the traditionalists, and they get really angry if people like mess with the tune or like maybe aren't connected to this exact one tradition bearer. And then there's like on the other end of the spectrum, there's the people who are like, this music's everybody's. We should all sing it. If like, probably my grandparents sang it, but they didn't pass it to me. So I'm learning it from this record. And like, this is how it goes now. And, you know, I think the dialogue between those sides is like what keeps the tradition going, kind of. Neither could exist without, like, I don't think it would be good if it was just one camp that survived. I think it's like the tension that is caused by those two philosophies that balances the situation.
One of the things I'd really like to hear about, because you're a ballad singer, but you're also a producer, right? It's what drew me to The Invisible Comes to Us, is the production on it.
Thank you. I have a very confusing relationship with production at the moment. I'm currently in art school. So I like producing that record led me to go to art school to study sculpture. Oh gosh. That was such a fun record to produce and kind of step out of what had been in our first records, which are basically, you know, like trying to play tasteful, beautiful versions of old songs, like in pretty sparse ways, but to really start to be a little more, I guess, editorial with, you know, what sounds do we want to hear? What does this song make us think of? Like, I love to think of music as far as in terms of like portraiture versus landscapes. Ballads are portraits, like so much modern music to me is landscapes. Instrumental music is often, I think of as landscapes. Like I listen to a lot of experimental music. So really thinking in a kind of theatrical sense about things, I suppose. Like that our version of the Irish Patriot was really like me being in the studio saying, but I want it to sound like we're walking through a forest right now, and the lights coming through the trees.
Yeah.
I stood beneath those lofty palms on India's burning shore. Listening to the tigers howl and the savage lions roar.
And that kind of led me to like get excited about conceptual art. And it feels like a very long and winding road that will also lead back to making another record. But I think for me, I like to entertain this broader idea of what an arrangement is of an old song.
Okay.
To me, this dance film is an arrangement of the ballad.
Yeah.
This is the wife of Usher as well.
So to just describe it, like we were thinking about this song, and in our first show, we thought, okay, what if Elizabeth sings this ballad and she sets a table on the stage? And that's our arrangement of the song. Like the notes are, it's not like, what are the notes? It's like, what's the setting? Like thinking about arrangement as like a pairing. Like you could pair it with chords, you could pair it with a certain instrument, you could pair it with motion, you can pair it with images, you could pair it with, it's like could get into this very like snobby art place, but it's really coming from this place of like, well, how did the old women set these ballads? Like this setting is she's doing the dishes, this setting is she's doing work. Like from the start, that collaboration really approached setting in that conceptual framework. So the film we made was this realization of that kind of very early performance gesture where we were like, oh yeah, like that'll be cool. And we did it in such weird places. Like we did it at the like Galax Public Library. We like had this show, and then we're like, and then we need a table and some cutlery, and like Elizabeth's gonna set a table. And I don't know what people thought about it or whether it was good or if it worked. I don't know. But we wanted to just make this film, and I had this image of the woman, you know, in this house with no walls, like in the middle of the forest, setting this table and thinking of, it's almost like trying to make a version that felt like as bleak as the song feels when you've sung it many, many, many times.
There lived a lady gay, and children she had 3. She sent them away to the northern school to learn their grammar. They had not been gone but a very short time, scarcely 3 weeks to the day, till death, cold death, came stealing along and stole those babes away.
So, yeah, I feel like that's how I think of production. Yeah, just this idea that to like go into a ballad, it's so, they're so rich and you can have so many tangents and ideas about them. And yeah, maybe I'm just overcomplicating things.
One thing is, I think it's really impressive is the way when people are just singing a song and there's no accompaniment, the range that they're able to get from just that is staggering. But thinking about what we have available now and how can we like augment that and make that just like really drive it home.
I think what's really effective about why your recording of Wife of Usher as well, but also your music on Invisible comes to us, is the singing is still so much at the forefront, and you're not doing lots of processing to that, and the arrangement is there to support that.
I mean, I think on some level it is creation with the story at the forefront. I mean, a big conversation me and Elizabeth had was, we both said, I don't want someone at the end to come up and say, like, oh, you're such a good singer. The ideal compliment that we did a good job is if someone comes up and says, oh my God, I can't believe the captain did that. Like when that happened, we were like, oh, we did our jobs. Like this really, like, I'm a pretty open listener. I could imagine a version of The Wife of Usher as well that had no lyrics, but that like told the story. So I feel like if it tells the story, then it's successful. I feel excited to challenge people and myself to say, well, okay, what are ways to tell stories? We have so many ways at our fingertips to tell the story. Like that the ballad and the singing tradition is important, but it's one way of one of many cool ways. So I don't know. That's why I went to art school.
We've danced around the song now quite a bit. And I think so we're talking this month about The Wife of Usher as well, which is also known as The Three Babes. Can you tell us the story of the song?
Yeah, it depends on the version. But, of course. But
let me guess, there was a lady.
There was a lady. Sometimes she's just a woman. Most often she's alone. She has 3 children. Sometimes they're grown children. A lot of the American versions just call them babes. So I just imagine them as children. She sends them away. In which direction? It depends. It's not clear why they're sent away. Some versions say to learn their grammary, but I don't think it's just school. We don't know. They have to be sent away. They're gone just a short time, and then she gets word that they have all died. And in some versions after that, she prays, she wishes for her children to return to her. Then in some versions, Christmas, but I believe some older versions, it was around Martinmas. She sees her children coming across the field to her. She sets a table with this feast for them. She makes their beds. She kind of prepares the house for them. They enter, and they're ghosts. They're not. And she asks them to stay, and they say, I cannot stay. I'm going away. And I was reading an earlier versions from Britain. Some of them, they're wearing birch hats as they come back, which I thought was interesting and seems connected to some magic of some sort. Like what is the significance of birch? I am not sure, but it seems witchy to me. In American versions, like Jesus becomes a big part of it, like God is a huge part of it. So she's saying, like, come eat with me, and then they say, we can't eat with you, we're going to heaven to eat with God. And I think other versions are not really engaged in that.
Yeah, because what's the significance of it happening at Christmas? Do you know?
I don't know.
It's weird, isn't it?
I don't know. It's like, or it's maybe just a day where, like a holy day. And I don't know the significance of Martinmas either.
I looked up Martinmas before because I didn't know. I saw it in the Steel I Span version, so I looked it up. And it turns out Saint Martin was sainted because he shared his coat with a beggar. And that's it. That's what he did. And so that was enough to get you a sainthood in those days.
It's quite a similar bar for getting a Tory peerage, isn't it? Let's not. Sorry, we've managed to keep it from being political. But there you go. I'll leave it there. Yeah.
It was on a dark, cold Christmas night when everything was still. She saw her 3
still.
So you were saying you think there maybe is more than just them going to school.
Well, I don't know. My sources are like Wikipedia, so
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah.
which is great. I feel like we're engaging in the same amount of speculation that people engaged in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's
yeah.
part of. I was kind of worried before I came on. I was like, oh, do I have to be like this ballad scholar? And then I was also like, we have so much more information now than we did then, and
Yeah.
it's kind of, these are myths. It's like archaeology. You're like, this is a fragment of something that I do not understand because it doesn't exist now, or it's not as significant, like the bark hats. So you go with your gut, or you can internet search it. But I just I love that image in these older versions. Like I'm looking through Child's Ballads, like her ghost children come and they're wearing these like hats of birch bark, is how I imagine. And it's very like they're of the earth. They're, connected to nature in this different way than they were before. They're like more of the earth. Here's a version that says their hats were made of the birch. It neither grew in sick nor ditch, nor in the, this is a very Scottish dialect one, but at the gates of paradise, the birch grew fair enough. So is it like the tree at the gates of paradise? Like that's a really cool image.
Yeah, trees come up a lot in this, and in ways that I'm absolutely convinced I'm never getting the full significance of. Yeah. So the version that you sent over the video, the thing that's really, really grabbed me about that is that it's all about the preparation.
Yeah.
And that really brings that out of the song. There's almost like a ritual element to it.
And I love the idea that these rituals, like that maybe even had more religious or ritualistic significance before, are now just these very kind of banal daily life rituals. Setting a table. But it also feels so connected to like an idea of being like catatonic in grief, like being so in grief that you're just kind of repeating. Like I feel like I've heard stories of that where, someone passes and you accidentally set their place at table. Because your body is not all the way processed that they're gone. And I feel like that's such a deep, beautiful part of that, of kind of the body going through these motions. And like, I think in this interpretation, it's like, I don't think the babes ever show, like maybe there never were ghosts. It's all could be all in your mind.
Again, crucially in the video, it's just the woman, and so again that really hits home that like you say, did they show up?
She set a table of bread and wine, just as neat as it could be. Come eat, come drink, my three little babes. Come eat, come drink with me.
And I was thinking this morning about also how high infant mortality was in the past.
Right.
Versus now. And just like the mother losing a child. I just was thinking about all these other singers of this ballad and singing at a time pre-hospital. I mean, I think like this song is such this strange processing of the death of children and how, I don't know, like it's this strange balm, like imagining this other person also experiencing this thing.
I've heard quite a lot of debate in recent years about, particularly from friends or people I've known who have lost children, and how it's not talked about. It seems like there's no real public way of acknowledging or sharing that. Perhaps that's something we've maybe lost in losing these stories. Is almost giving people permission to acknowledge that this is the thing.
Yeah, or even thinking about miscarriages as well. I've been thinking a lot because I've been so sick with COVID for the last almost year now, and there's been so much grief and it's been so difficult, and thinking about like what the songs mean when your life is like pretty okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you're like, oh, I like this story. And then this feeling of like when you're going through a really hard time, whether it's a national disaster like now or an illness, a death, like, oh, like these songs mean this whole different thing. Like they take on this different feeling, going through the pain that I was feeling, and then like almost this weird relief of like how much people have gone through before me. Like,
right.
like, oh my gosh, these feelings are not so unique to me. Like that there is this darkness and loneliness, and it's in the songs.
Yeah.
Cold clay hangs over my head. Green grass grows over my feet, and every tear that you shed for me but wets my winding sheet.
Do you think maybe that's why folk songs have such a tendency to be really dark, because they were serving as such a strong consolation to people who are facing?
I was thinking about this the other day, like how so many of these, the kind of Anglo tradition is a lot about processing what a therapist would call interpersonal trauma. You know, a lot of violence against women, a lot of like love affairs gone wrong and not knowing what to do with those feelings. A lot of pain. These are not just, when I think about what the ballads are, like it's really psychological, all of them, like really like like giving this strange set of tools for processing trauma.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
I am going to sit on that for a few days, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think in some of the versions of this song, a bit of solace is given in the fact that the kids are going to a better place?
I mean, there is this kind of feeling of like, you need to accept our passing. Like it's harsh in a way, but it also, there is this feeling of like, is it giving some sort of permission to move on, to say like, we appear for you one last time and then we have to go, in a kind of weirdly gentle way. Like I feel like there's a sense that they like accept her, like I have this image of them watching her do these things, or you know, they see it, they see the offering, and then they say, we can't take this. That it's not angry, it's not like...
That's interesting, because I always interpreted the line, take it off, cried the eldest one. It is like an exclamation, isn't it?
Well, there's some versions, I'm looking through the child ballads, there's some where she's kind of punished. She like tries to go with them, and then go back, sweet Jesus replied, for thou hast 9 days to repent for the wickedness that thou hast done.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's what we see in The Cruel Mother, the song that we covered in our first series, is that she gets 7 long years, is the classic refrain of... Yeah,
it's interesting, like, that her wickedness in this is just like, she's trying to fight death. She's trying to pretend death is not real. She's saying, like, I know that they're dead, but I'm going to feed them anyway. Like, I'm going to cheat death. And maybe that's the wickedness, according to that version, saying you're not allowed to cheat death, you have to accept it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can say like any of these old songs are feminist, but I do think this song makes this sort of space for a woman's grief that feels like really meaningful to me in some way that I can't exactly articulate. Like, there's a lot of loneliness for some of these women in these songs. And like this image of this woman doing these actions felt like this way of kind of watching a woman's very private acts of grief, kind of regardless of how the other people like Jesus or the sons think about it. It's this feeling of like, that is a thing that women go through, and feeling like, I don't know what this song is based on, but it feels like kind of holding up this story of the grieving woman feels like a Yeah, she feels very powerful to me. The grieving mother. Like, oh.
Is there anything you're particularly hoping to hear out of takes we get submitted? Or?
I mean, I'm excited to hear it, whatever people make. I also feel like I would challenge people to kind of go pretty deep. Like, what is this song about to you? Like, what are the feelings and the implications of this story? And beyond its melody, this is such a heavy song. And like, how does the heaviness inspire an arrangement or an experiment? Like, it would be really, I mean, it's not great for a podcast, but to versions that are visual.
We're totally open to video takes, and if people have got them to send in, it's a wonderful thing to see. We'll definitely play a part of the music on the podcast. Yeah.
Awesome.
So actually, I want to flag up that I only realised I knew this song a couple of days ago. When you sent it over, I was like, oh, great, that'll be interesting to look into. And then I remembered that I used to play it in a band. I used to play it in my band, the Vicars of Skiffle, which Tim was an intermittent member of as well. But we learned it from Jeano Newsom.
Yeah. And she learned it from Texas Gladden.
Gladden, absolutely, yeah. So we very much followed the chord progressions Jeano Newsom used and her arrangement to some extent. Jeano Newsom plays this piano part that goes dong, da, dong, da, dong, dang. And then we split that up into different vocal parts. And it was a sort of hocketing effect where one of us going dum, 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 you know, and the other one, that, that. If we'll play a bit of the recording and you'll hear me going, that, really loud, as the wonderful Jess Browning sings lead vocals on it.
There was a night a lady and three little babes had she sent them away to a far country to love their grandfather. They hadn't been gone.
Cool, we've gone pretty in depth. Tim, do you have any ideas about what you're going to do with this?
I have not really thought about it yet, but I think what I came away from, particularly from the video thinking, was that I want it to be nice and sparse, because I think it's just like, it seems to really sort of shine in its own strength. So I kind of don't want to do too much to it. It's either don't do too much or just do so much that it's unrecognizable. There's no in the middle, I think, with this for me.
Or just like make a noise piece about grief.
Yeah.
I feel like I would totally accept that.
That is totally acceptable.
Pinpoint into like this feeling of grief, or like just like who's gonna make the music concrete piece that's just like placing plates down on it.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be totally sick to make a music concrete piece with this.
Yeah.
As the kind of set of objects that you can use. And I also think it's totally cool if your version is singing it unaccompanied. And you barely change anything. But because I think also the idea of a version, like because of capitalism, right? Like people can claim copyright on arrangements if you haven't written the song, blah, blah, blah. But I think to make a ballad your own or your own version, it can also be like a pretty faithful to the person you learned it from, but that you have embodied the song and you see the story and you're doing it in your own voice and you're not copying how like their inflection, but you're telling it in your own voice. But maybe the melody is totally the same, and maybe a lot of the timing is the same. I think that also is a version. Like if you've done all of that kind of thinking and research and understanding what the song means to you. And I think that's the kind of cool complication about ballads, like that it's not about always like saying, here's my take on it. Sometimes it can just be like, oh, I've done the thing. I've embodied, I've processed. I'm telling the story. And so I love the idea that there could be also this huge range of someone just singing it and trying to really appreciate, oh, this person really sounds like they're in the song. Wow. And then someone who's like, made the noise piece and you're like, whoa, they're really like trying to get at like the darkness of the feeling of like your children have all died.
Yes.
I think I think that's why I love staying with traditional music, because I feel like those are two polar opposites, but they like the tension between them is so awesome compared to like if I just listen to noise music, and I feel like there's nothing to actually provide tension for.
Yeah, cool. Very exciting. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I think that's a good place to finish.
It's been my pleasure.
Look forward to hearing loads of takes of The Wife of Usher as well.
And we also...
Great, so a lot to think about there.
Yeah, I'm excited to get going.
Yep, so if you want to learn The Wife of Usher as well along with us, there's a resource pack available at oldtunesfreshtakes.com. This has everything you need to get started, including scores, chord sheets and lyrics. Remember to go and like us on Facebook, Twitter and SoundCloud, where we'll be sharing playlists of our favourite versions, as well as your takes as they come in.
We'll be meeting back up with Anna in April to listen to your takes. If you'd like to be included in the podcast, then try and get your version to us by Monday, 5th of April. That's the 5th of April to get your versions included in the podcast. If you can't manage that date, then please do send your recordings whenever you can, as we'll be continuing to share them across social media.
We always reply to messages and are really keen to make it as easy as possible for you to submit, so whatever stage you're at, get in touch and we'll be happy to provide feedback and advice. We're also hosting a Zoom meetup on Saturday 20th of March. This is just an informal chat for anyone who's thinking about taking part or wants to nerd out about music with us, so go and check out our Facebook page for more details. We hope to see you there.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode of Old Tunes Fresh Takes, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
Yeah, once again, this is for everyone to take part, regardless of your ability or musical style. We can't wait to hear your fresh takes.